Hello everyone, this is part 47 of What If Naruto Had the Ultimate Dojutsu, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Anbu headquarters. Itachi was standing before Kushina, who was currently behind her desk signing some papers. She had her current Anbu attire on, but not her mask. The head Anbu commander always worked without their mask on. Something about trust in the Anbu. Recently the previous Anbu head had either been demoted, or promoted on how you look at it, to the Junin position to help with a few missions. Naturally it was unanimous that Kushina be named the Anbu head, which she had no qualms with. However, the only problem that Kushina ever thought about it was that the Anbu head, unless utter emergencies were present, couldn't leave the village except by the Hokage's orders. It was a slow and boring day, but Kushina lived with it. Talking with Yugao on occasion was a plus in its own right. So that's what you and Sochi believe, right? Kushina asked, getting Itachi to nod. Since being reinstated back in Konoha, Itachi hadn't gone back to the Anbu. He had just taken a job as the Hokage's elite bodyguard along with Genma and Rado. He had long ago filled the requirements for it. Itachi was currently speaking with Kushina about his thoughts on the traitor inside Konoha. He had a few leads and it mostly stemmed around the red light district. The one place where crime was the most frequent, but the thing was this. Naruto had been trying to make the district better. He had placed a lot of money into its construction and protection, but it still seemed to be a little worse. It was one of the many things that Itachi knew about. Now Itachi knew that no village was perfect and they never would be, but for someone with Naruto's efforts then something was going down. Itachi had one of the Chunin in the area investigate on what could happen. That is right. I believe that. Whoever Hokage-sama believes is a traitor, then that traitor is going to have a lot of influence. They know the inner workings of the village. It might also be why Iwa was able to get in so easily. Have you noticed something? Itachi asked, and Kushina narrowed her eyes. You mean a pattern? Kushina asked, getting Itachi to firmly nod his head. He looked out the window of Kushina's office and looked out into one of the Konoha walls that was still broken. It had been from when Tsunade and Kyuubi pushed Tsukasa out of the village. The hole wasn't as big, but it was quite noticeable. The guards had been strengthened in that area for a fear of ambush. Yes, Madara Uchiha, Iwa, what did they have in common? Itachi asked. Kushina folded her arms and thought that over. She then widened her eyes and looked over to Itachi, who, once again, nodded to her assumptions. They were after Kasumi, but that shouldn't mean anything. Madara went after me that night too. You were one of the few people who truly knew about me. Iwa never went after Sochi because we kept that truth hidden, a little too well if you ask me, but I'm letting that go. You also know what Kasumi holds, right? Kushina asked, and Itachi responded with another nod. Yes, I was informed just before her birth of young Yuna-chan. I don't think I need to say this, but I found it unlikely that Kami herself would entrust even a fraction to Kasumi, but seeing it in person then I believed it rather fully. Now it makes sense if he went after you. I can also see why Iwa would be scared of the future. All the nations knew that the Naruto-sama was having a child. It was major news to the villages. I don't think I need to say this either, but for Iwa this wasn't a good sign. Naruto Uzumaki, the youngest person to take the cage position with Gaara-sama right behind him. The son of Iwa's most hated enemy, along with a dojutsu that allows for copying bloodlines. Add that to the fact that his child is the Hokage and light carrier's daughter, along with the possibility of that dojutsu, Iwa would have a damn field day, Itachi said, getting Kushina more than a little irritated. That still doesn't explain why someone in our village would even try to target Kasumi, Kushina said, and Itachi shook his head. He folded his arms, but that didn't last long and he brushed a hand through his hair. I would expect it from Kumo, but Konoha and Kumo have an alliance which seems to stem well from Yugito-san. Iwa's the only one that Konoha seems to have a problem with, but add the people who were left alive in the Konoha-Taki war, then that's giving them plenty of motivation. Kushina-sama, I would have to believe that whoever has done this then it had stemmed off from last war we had, Itachi said, and Kushina grimaced at such a thought. That wore a rather short one, but that was only because Taki had rushed and Konoha had more than enough allies to not make it a threat, but Kushina didn't understand something. Iwa had sent Kuretsuki to aid Konoha in the war, and while in their letter that no one would be the end of Konoha except for Iwa, it sounded like they bore no real hatred to each other. If that was the case, then what was the reason for the K? That does make sense. So it would have to be someone that was in a high position, had influence, and knew enough about Konoha structure to shift the guard, but not only that. It also had to be someone that could control the shinobi. Alright Itachi, I'll inform Sochi of what you've found. Just hurry back and explain things better, Kushina said, getting Itachi to bow before he quickly disappeared in a swirl of wind, leaving Kushina alone. What is that old man thinking? Kushina wondered to herself. She hoped it wouldn't be anything too out there if they would be in trouble. Naturally, no one knew that Kyuubi had her yin chakra sealed back into her body, and that helped to probably further develop the baby. It was this time that Naruto made much more precautions. Some that Kushina and Kyuubi found hilarious, but it was understandable. Kyuubi's pregnancy was pretty much known only to the UNI clan and the Anbu. Even then, only a very select few knew that it was truly Kyuubi who was out of her cage. They had just figured that it was Naruto keeping her from seeking her vengeance on them. They were even more surprised that she would get pregnant, and by Naruto no less. Since she had helped in the Ruby incident, Kyuubi had been something of neutral in people's minds. Without her they would have gone under, but she was also the first thing to terrorize them. They were just neutral. People didn't know how to feel. For Kushina, she didn't really mind it at all. What's going to happen? Kushina wondered as she looked at the bright sun in front of her. A Wagakur. Kuretsuki hummed to herself as she walked up the stairs of the Tsuchikage mansion. She had a success with AC rank mission that she had been the leader of. Her efforts were paying off, and she wanted to tell her Gigi and hopefully find out if she could be getting into Iwa's Jonin exams in the coming months. As she ascended the stairs, Kuretsuki came up to the door and was ready to knock over it before she had someone talking. She stopped and pressed her ear to the door. Onoki, explain this immediately, someone said, and Kuretsuki raised an eyebrow. A secretary passed by the door and Kuretsuki grabbed her shoulder. Hey, what's going on in there? Kuretsuki asked, and the secretary looked at the door before clearing her tea. She leaned against Kuretsuki's ear, since this was obviously not for many people to be hearing at the moment. Tsuchikage-sama is speaking with Tsuchi no Kuni's daimyo at the moment, she said before quickly walking off. Kuretsuki raised an eyebrow again and leaned her head close to the door again. What do you mean you don't know anything? I get a message from Hino Kuni's daimyo that Konoha is requesting compensation from Iwa for an assault against their village, he said, getting Kuretsuki's bee to run cold. Assault? Gigi didn't tell me about this, Kuretsuki thought to herself, and she listened closer to the door. Actually, if she tried any more to lean on the door, then she would have been through the door of the office. I have told you that I did not authorize this act, Onoki said, and Kuretsuki backed away from the door when she heard a heavy S. It sounded like a hand hitting a desk or something. It was obvious that Onoki was too busy arguing, or he would have sensed her outside the door, which she was inwardly grateful for. Kuretsuki clenched her fists and listened more. Authorized or unauthorized, I don't give a damn, Tsuchikage. You're in charge of your shinobi and you're responsible for what they do. Do you know what the daimyo said to me? He said that your shinobi just tried to take one of the Rokudaim's wives and her child. He even said that one of the shinobi who had taken her had said it was sanctioned by you. Do you have even a fraction of knowledge on how lucky we are that the Rokudaim is being merciful, and how he's just happy that both are fine? All he asked was for a portion of Iwa's profits and for a formal apology sent from you, the daimyo said, and Kuretsuki gasped as she backed away from the door. I said that I didn't know about it. I have no qualms with the brat. Why should I apologize for what I have no control over? Onoki asked, and the daimyo growled. Because you're the damn Tsuchikage. Damn it, this is embarrassing to be told of by Hino Kuni's daimyo. You'd better be running a tighter ship around this village, or I'm going to have you replaced. Just now, a few years ago, we got out of the debt of the Third Great Ninja War. Try not to do more that will get us the daimyo said, and Kuretsuki felt that they were finished talking and moved from the door. The door opened and the daimyo saw Kuretsuki walking away with a few folders in her hands. He shook his head of some thoughts and continued on his way. Kuretsuki narrowed her eyes before she made a quick turn and walked into the room. She saw Onoki with his hands on his head. He seemed to be very tired and Kuretsuki knew why. Onoki had been up late dealing with some papers that we talking about the recent renovations to the village for the Taki inhabitants. What Onoki had actually said was the truth. He didn't authorize that assault, however he unauthorized it. That's why he had chosen it this way. If Iwa was caught, then he could say that his shinobi were acting on his own and Konoha couldn't trace it back to Iwa, but to this recent news then he knew that he had been walking on thin ice. Gigi, why? Kuretsuki asked. The Sandaime Tsuchikage sighed and looked up at his granddaughter. It's not something that I will explain to you right now. You're too young for it. Just leave, Onoki said, and Kuretsuki narrowed her eyes. She was too young. Too young. I am a chunin, ready to take the Junin exams. I'm not too young for anything. Kuretsuki growled. Onoki glared up at her and his eyes made her shiver as she took a step back. You are dismissed, Kuretsuki, Onoki said as he continued to write on some papers. Kuretsuki growled and balled her fists. She spun on her heel and opened the door. You're playing with fire, Gigi, remember that, Kuretsuki said as the door closed. Onoki stopped writing and he closed his eyes. He gave a deep sigh as he looked at the door that Kuretsuki just left. He then looked up at the wall to see the Shodaime and Nadaime Tsuchikage. Both their faces etched into the wall. What am I doing wrong here? He thought to himself. Honestly, what was wrong with him? With Nanabe. Nanabe and her team quickly entered the rendezvous point. They all dropped to the ground while Nana had Hinata scan the area. What do you see? Nanabe asked and Hinata looked left and right. Tayuya and Hana remained tense as did Sasuke and Haku. They were all ready for anything. Kimimaro was strangely the only one to feel calm for the moment. Kiba and Akamaru were just as tense as everyone else, but they seemed to handle themselves. Over the last 2 days of running to the location, Nanabe had taught Naruto's formula to Hana, Hinata, Haku and Tayuya. They had easily gotten it fast as Nana had expected. Their chakra control was at the level that Nanabe wanted, so they were more than ready for their meeting. Hi Nana-san. IICB. They are on the ground, unmoving. It seems that they've been for quite a while, Hinata said and Nanabe cursed. She folded her arms as everyone waited for her orders. All right, let's proceed. We'll go about this cautiously, Nanabe said and everyone else nodded. They rushed off through the trees to their objectives. They were happy that they weren't far and they dropped to the ground. Nanabe narrowed her eyes while everyone seemed confused. On the ground were 4 Kiri shinobi trapped in crystal. Nanabe didn't need any evidence that they weren't alive. They had long since suffocated from the lack of air. It was their rendezvous and by the looks of it they were taken by surprise. Nanabe touched the crystal while the Heimaru brothers and Akamaru sniffed the corpses. Kimimaro and Sasuke narrowed their eyes while Kiba growled. Someone else is here, he said. No one called him on how obvious that was, especially since now wasn't time for such Nanabe nodded and she could feel several powerful signatures further ahead. One of these signatures felt horribly familiar. How long had it been that she thought about this power? But it felt suppressed for some reason. Nanabe shook her head and looked out into the mist. Alright, it's obvious that we're going to need to get some things done if we're going to be fighting. Do all of you remember the formation that we went over just a few hours ago? Nanabe asked. The others nodded and Nanabe looked forward. She cracked her knuckles and released her chakra. The chakra forced the mist to dispel from their view and everyone could see a large pond in front of them. They looked left and right and far away everyone could see a strange light, but not just that. They could also see a very large turtle. What is that? Kimimaro asked and Nanabe growled. Isabu was right in front of her eyes and he didn't seem happy. She also felt a heavy surge of chakra which told her that whatever was happening that it was making her little brother more than a little pissed off. That would probably be the Sanbi, the formation. We're moving in. Once we do, be ready for anything and watch each other's back, Nanabe ordered. Everyone nodded and they rushed off. Meanwhile, near the lake, Gurren was watching Yukimaru control the Sanbi with his unique chakra. It was a special chakra that, when Yukimaru ate pills that were prescribed to him by Kabuto and Orochimaru, his chakra would be much more powerful and allow him to be able to control the Sanbi, in exchange for his health. It was also because of this that Gurren felt her heart clench each time that she had seen this happen. Kobayashi and Ayaka were leaning near a tree and Sato just stood emotionless as usual. He didn't even seem to have awareness of the world around him, except for his objective, or rather his master's. However, he couldn't get rid of the notion in his head that this was just wrong. He had other that he needed to be doing, but his body wouldn't listen to him. He wondered why. Karen, Juugo and Sugetsu were just natural as they watched the interaction. This was what Orochimaru wanted and they didn't do anything about it. They just watched Yukimaru work his magic or whatever he was to be doing. Karen actually felt bad for the boy, but only just a tad or so. Suddenly Karen shifted and closed her eyes. She hastily opened them and ran up to Gurren. "We have company, Gurren-san. They are coming fast," Karen said, and Gurren narrowed her eyes. Kobayashi leaned up and Sato tapped his sword. Sugetsu grinned while Juugo seemed ready for anything. "Most missed?" Gurren asked. She would just do to them what she had done to the others who had just been surprised that they were there. "And no, I believe that this is Konoha. They have their headbands and they're racing towards this location. 2 Inuzuka, a Hyuga, an Uchiha, and 2 former of our own. Also there is someone with monstrous chakra." It's getting hard to breath," Karen said, panting. Everyone tensed, but they didn't have to do so anymore. "Kaiten, you know jutsu," Sasuke shouted as he launched a heavy fireball at everyone. Gurren and the others cursed as they jumped away from the fire as it destroyed the woods behind them. How did they get this close? Gurren shouted as she turned to see that Yukimaru was all right. She breathed a sigh of relief, but it didn't last long as she heard another cry. Gatinga, Hana and the Heimaru brothers shouted as they launched themselves at Kobayashi and Ayaka. The two were forced to dodge as Gurren tried to assess the situation. She turned her head just in time to block a sword strike from Haku. The medic narrowed her eyes as the two clashed with each other. Juugo let out a punch, but he was surprised as it was blocked by Kiba and Tayuya. They snarled at him and Juugo glared back. Sugetsu swung his sword, but Sasuke blocked that as well. Everyone was together and they noticed Nanabe drop to the ground. "Looks like we made it just in time to stop this," Nanabe said, and everyone growled, but soon gasps went over. Kobayashi stared at his daughter while Karen, Juugo and Sugetsu stared at Kimimaro and Sasuke. "Hana," Kobayashi said, and Hana growled, her Inuzuka features coming over her face. "You bastard," Hana shouted as she swung her leg at Kobayashi. The former clan head to the Inuzuka snarled and blocked her leg, but Hana shifted her stance and launched her other leg towards Kobayashi's face. He grinned and in a swift motion he kicked Hana back as she skidded across the ground. Kiba ran to aid her as he helped her to her feet. "So both my kids are here. Well, isn't this nice? Aren't you a little in over your heads?" Kobayashi asked with an arrogant grin. Kiba and Hana snarled while Nanabe turned and she felt her bee run cold. "That power. That's him. He's really here. Damn it all to hell. This wasn't in my plan." Nana yelled at the top of her inner voice. She quickly discarded everyone and rushed towards Sato. The swordsman quickly saw her move and a voice in the back of his head screamed at him to remember her face. However, he didn't remember it in time as Nanabe took her fist back. She quickly it against his own and Sato felt a burst of chakra that sent him flying through the air. Everyone gasped as he went sailing. Nanabe growled before she turned around. "Uchiha, Kaguya, Kiba, intercept them now," Nanabe ordered. Sasuke looked at Karen, who was looking at him with grief in her eyes. "Kimimaro, why did you betray Orochimaru?" Juugo asked, and Kimimaro closed his eyes. He took out his bone sword and took his stance of the camellia. He glared at Juugo while Juugo took a fighting stance. "I did not betray him. He has betrayed me. Don't interfere, Juugo," Kimimaro said, and he noticed Sugetsu charge at Sasuke. "You're going to pay, Sasuke," Sugetsu shouted at the top of his lungs. Sasuke narrowed his eyes and took out the Raijin as he charged at Sugetsu. The two quickly crossed swords as they glared at each other. "I don't know who you are, but you're a nuisance," Sasuke said, and Sugetsu snarled. "You don't know me, but I know you very well. Orochimaru never shuts up about letting you get away," Sugetsu said as he tried to kick Sasuke in the face. However, Sasuke saw it coming with his Sharingan and quickly ducked under it. He parried Sugetsu's sword and sent his Raijin towards his sea. Sasuke threw Sugetsu and narrowed his eyes, but they, just as fast, widened as Sasuke was splashed in the face with water. He coughed and he noticed Sugetsu reform his body. "What are you?" Sasuke asked, and Sugetsu chuckled. I'm the one that's going to bring your head to Orochimaru, Sugetsu said as he rushed as Sasuke. The Uchiha quickly assumed the stance that Itachi taught him as he and Sugetsu continued to fight. In another place, Gurren was currently fighting with Haku as she tried to keep the ice user away from the Sanbi and Yukimaru. Gurren rolled to the side as Haku continued to fling her large sword over the field. However, it did take some work, but Haku was doing it. She really had to take Naruto for those weightless seals as well as Tsunde's training, or this would be impossible. Don't get in my way. Gurren growled as Haku and her clashed again. Haku looked to the side and saw Yukimaru still screaming like always. To use a child in that way. You really are low, but I suppose those who work for Orochimaru would know, Haku said, getting Gurren pissed off that someone insulted her master. Gurren launched a kick at Haku's face, but Haku blurred to the side with her speed. She and Gurren clashed and clanged across the field while Hinata and Tayuya moved to stop Yukimaru from what he was doing. Gurren cursed as she saw all the others preoccupied. She and Haku jumped away from each other as Gurren quickly did her hand signs and S them together. Shoten, Hashoka Ryu, Crystal Release, Tearing Crystal Falling Dragon, Gurren hollered and everyone felt the earth tear as a crystal dragon came from the ground. This crystal. She's the one who K them, Haku thought in realization as she formed her own hand signs. Suten, Suiruden no Jutsu, Haku called out and from the water rose a water dragon as both dragons converged on each other. They S into each other, but Haku was forced to dodge as Gurren's crystal dragon was much stronger than her water dragon. It S against the ground while Haku landed far away from it. She glared up while Gurren noticed Hinata and Tayuya practically at Yukimaru's back. S, she said before she looked up and turned to see Nanabe still trying to beat the S out of Sato. Sato, stop them. Gurren hollered. Sato blocked Nana's leg with his sword and he turned to see Hinata and Tayuya running for the boy. Sato looked back at Nana's angry face and he didn't know why she was so angry. He just closed his eyes and Nanabe gasped as a burst of wind flew past her. She looked back and she noticed Sato blurring across the beach. F. Nanabe said as she applied chakra to her feet and blasted after him. Sato jumped into the air before he held his sword over his head and cloaked it in a mysterious purple-colored chakra. Musei Kumo Ippen, Silent Cloud single S, Sato said as he swung his sword and quickly sheathed it. It was almost closed as Nanabe's words assaulted Hinata and Tayuya's ears. Hyuga, Tayuya, stop. Nanabe cried and they did so immediately. Both gasped as a wave of chakra went across the ground and through the beach. It went tearing through the water as it slowly exploded far away. The S was that. Tayuya called out, but they were lucky as Nanabe grabbed them and pulled them to the ground. Sato swung his sword against them as Nanabe covered her body to protect the two in front of her. They see her robes to pieces, but Nanabe wasn't finished as she raised her hand into the air. She S it to the ground and a large chakra wave was sent through the earth. Sato shifted his stance as did everyone else. That shockwaves went rippling as they tore away at the water. Yukimaru's boat rocked making him lose concentration and fall back. He coughed and sweated as he looked up to see Sanbi glaring dangerously at him. Gurren cursed as the Sanbi looked at everyone over the field. He looked down and he noticed the woman with green hair. That green hair, that's Nanabe, Sanbi said in its thoughts. He looked down and he noticed who she was fighting. The Sanbi's B ran cold as he glared at Sato. He roared and everyone could feel it quake as Gurren collected Yukimaru's unconscious body. Kobayashi and Ayaka cursed while Hana and Kiba gasped over. They noticed Sanbi open its mouth as compressed chakra and water formed in it. Sanbi quickly launched a burst of compressed water in everyone's direction. Oi Isabu, what the hell are you doing? Chome said with a growl as everyone jumped out of the way. Sato swung his sword and S the compressed water in half as it went in opposite directions. He didn't look any worse for wear as he sheathed his sword. Kimimaro kicked Juugo away from him as the young man went sliding across the ground. He coughed and he noticed Kimimaro charging at him. Juugo growled and quickly stood to his feet as he charged at Kimimaro. Meanwhile, Kobayashi and Ayakamaru were having their fun as he kicked Kiba, getting the Inuzuka to cough. Hana came to his aid and lifted her brother up. Kiba, are you okay? Hana asked and Kiba nodded painfully. He coughed up some B, but he then shook it off. I'm fine, Kiba said and they both turned to see Kobayashi chuckling. So both my kids have the balls to try and fight me. Well, that's just fine. See if you can even try. Kobayashi said, getting Hana and Kiba to curse. You. How could you do that to Ka-san? You left because she wouldn't submit to you. You're just a lowlife, Kobayashi, Hana said, growling, but Kobayashi just let it wash off him like he didn't even care. Which he really didn't. Oh, you hurt me, Hana. After all I did for you. Well, whatever, tell me, how is life as being older than your stepfather? Kobayashi said, and Hana growled at being reminded of Naruto. She looked away, but she noticed Kiba stand to his feet. Don't insult Naruto. He's more of a friend, father, and leader than you ever will be. Kiba shouted, and Kobayashi chuckled as he and Ayaka charged at them. Kiba and Akamaru rushed them, much to Hana's surprise, as they closed the distance. Both went against each other as Kiba s Kobayashi in the face, but Kobayashi countered with a kick to the gut. They viciously attacked each other, and so did Ayaka and Akamaru. The dogs growled at each other, and soon Kobayashi realized that he was dealing with both his daughter and son. They attacked together as Kobayashi was forced to block them all. He dodged, ducked, rolled, and jumped away from them as they did the same. Kiba landed on the ground as Akamaru landed next to him. Zetsu, Gatsuga, absolute fang, passing fang, Kiba shouted as they charged at his father. Hana jumped out of the way while Kobayashi snickered. He dropped on all fours and launched himself at Kiba and Akamaru. They bashed into each other, but Kiba was sent flying into the air. He crossed his fingers as he quickly fell to the ground. Hana, he called, and Hana nodded. She quickly did a handstand as Kiba landed on the soles of her feet. Kobayashi seemed surprised by the act as Kiba shouted. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, Kiba shouted as he created 3 clones. They all charged at Kobayashi, but a burst and S from Ayaka dispelled one of them as the other 2 continued. Kiba moved behind them. Ayaka moved to intercept, but she was S and a cough escaped her body as the Heimaru brothers and Akamaru quickly pounced on her. They made her skid across the ground as Kiba and Hana were left to deal with their father. Separate the dog from his pack to win. Not bad, brats, but Kobayashi said as the curse mark extended from his N. It went across his face, and Kiba knew what to expect from his father. He had been hit quite a few times by that technique, and he really did hurt like a damn bee. Hana stared in shock as Kobayashi pulled his fist back. I was the one who made that technique. Kobayashi shouted. He charged his fist with chakra and S, the 2 clones, getting them to dispel. Hana gasped and rushed to aid Kiba, but she noticed Kiba jump along one of the clones back before it dispelled. But you didn't make this, Kiba said, and Kobayashi noticed 3 more Kibas than before as they slid across the ground. They pulled their feet out as they kicked Kobayashi into the air. Inuzu ka, Kiba said as Kobayashi looked up and he noticed Kiba spin violently. Quote. Gatsuga Renden, Kiba shouted as he S into Kobayashi's body and plowed him into the ground. The place exploded as Kiba slid back next to Hana. He dropped to one knee and panted while Hana held him up. Just as she did that, everyone heard a shout as Sasuke lunged the Raijin at Sugetsu, getting a result as Sugetsu cried from the lightning emitting from its blade. He was sent flying back as he crashed into the ground. Guren heard the crash and she saw Haku currently healing Kimimaro. He coughed as Juugo was panting. His curse mark was over his entire body. Sasuke-kun, stop this, Karen said, and Sasuke turned to her. He snorted and continued. Chidori Senbon, Sasuke said as he waved his hand, sending out a large wave of lightning over the area. Karen dodged and jumped out of the way. Sugetsu rolled away from them and Juugo jumped back. They panted and everyone noticed Guren S the ground. Shoten, Omawatari no Jutsu, crystal release, the god's divine pathway crossing technique, Guren shouted as she blasted a long stream of crystals forward toward Hinata, Nanabe and Tayuya. The last of the 2 quickly S the ground. Doton, Doruheiki, earth release, earth defensive wall, Tayuya shouted as she raised up a slab of earth to block the assault. It only worked for an instantly as everyone jumped away. Nanabe growled as she and Sato clashed again. She noticed Sanbi swing his tail at them both. Nanabe jumped in the air and so did Sato. These 2. I know them. I have to remember, Sato thought to himself as Nanabe brought her fist back and she threw it. Sato sent out his own and the 2 clashed into each as they launched a burst of chakra from their fists. What's wrong with him? He hasn't spoken one word to me before we fought. He would never keep his mouth shut if he did, Nanabe thought to herself. She quickly straightened herself as Sato lowered his sword to his feet. Dashinkan, greatness dragon's shock, Sato said as Nanabe quickly covered her body in her chakra. She covered her body as Sato s his sword against her body, and with a sharp wave he sent her flying into the water below. Everyone gasped as the waters seemed to part for a split second before they covered over Nanabe's body. A large S appeared as the result in the water before it was covered. Nana growled and splashed deep into the water while Sato landed. He sheathed his sword while Nanabe floated down. She could still see Isabu fighting it out with the others and sighed. There is too much fighting. I'll have to revise this strategy. Looks like it's time for an exit. I'll have to think about this later, Nanabe thought. She quickly opened her hands and closed her eyes. Water swirled into the center of it, and so did her bi and chakra. She compressed the ball in her hands and held it. She quickly swam forward and leapt out of the air and yelled. Withdraw! She shouted, and everyone glanced up as Nanabe held out her hands. Instantly everyone, by sheer luck, jumped out of the way as a powerful beam rang from her hands and through the tree, blowing them all away. The explosion covered everything while Sanbi seemed surprised. That's definitely Nanabe. Looks like I'd better get out of here too, Sanbi thought as he regressed into the water. Sasuke grabbed Kimimaro while Tayuya grabbed Haku and Hinata. Kiba and Hana rushed away in the light while everyone was distracted. Nanabe quickly vanished also and the light disappeared. Guren uncovered her eyes and gasped as she saw what was behind her. Yukimaru passed out while Karen, Sugetsu and Juugo were all surprised. Kobayashi and Ayaka whistled while Sato looked on. Behind them was the biggest clearing of trees that they had ever seen in their lives. It extended for miles, or from what they could see. They turned back and all noticed that the Sanbi was gone. Guren said as she looked that no one was around but them. She turned and she saw Kobayashi and Ayaka were fine. Juugo was really beaten up and so was Sugetsu. Sato had a few bruises, but he was okay also. Karen seemed to be in turmoil, but all in all they were alive. We should get out of here, Karen said adjusting her glasses. Everyone agreed and they all quickly left in a trail of dust, allowing for the waters to remain peaceful once again. Somewhere else, the Konoha team panted as they dropped to the ground. Nanabe quickly covered them behind some trees as they rested for a little bit. Kimimaro-san, you're hurt, Haku said, and Kimimaro could feel her concern as his right eye was beat from being hit by Juugo. The guy was still as strong as Kimimaro remembered. He figured he could have stopped his rampage, but obviously he needed a lot more work to be done. Haku placed her hands over his eyes and quickly began to heal them while everyone else rested. This is going to be difficult, Nanabe said, getting everyone to look at her. What do you mean? Hinata asked, and Nanabe looked up from her murmurings. She sighed tiredly and looked out. It's not something you guys would understand. Rest here and prepare to move out at nightfall, Nanabe said before she disappeared. This left everyone confused while Hana and Haku tended to everyone's wounds. Sasuke and Kimimaro narrowed their eyes while Hana, Haku, Kiba and Tayuya seemed tense. Meanwhile, Nanabe dropped to the ground and closed her eyes. She held up a hand sign and sent out a flat burst of chakra. Come, I swear if the both of you don't connect to me right this instant, Nanabe thought, and before long she got a reply. Hello Nana-chan. Ni's here at home watching TV with Kyubi-chan. What's up? Nibi asked, getting Nanabe irritated. She steadied her breathing and calmed her nerves enough to finally be able to think straight for a while. Nana, what is it? It's really late and you're talking with us right now, Kyubi said as she was leaning on the couch sighing blissfully. And why not? She was feeling very tired from her walking around. Kyubi had had a very busy day. Look here both of you, this possibly the worst situation to come by. He's here. And I mean here. As in I just went head to head with him here. Nanabe shouted, getting Kyubi and Nibi to look at each other. Whoa, calm down there Nana-chan. Who's where? Nibi asked, lightly laughing at a TV show of an ad for soap. Nanabe growled at the carefree nature, but what could she do about it? They didn't know, but in a few seconds they would. Well, let me see. How about Sato Saranzo? He's here. It's that better for the both of you. I just fought Tusan's enemy, got it. Nanabe hollered mentally. Kyubi leaned up and Nibi narrowed her eyes. She turned off the TV while they straightened up. You fought him. Seriously. Are you insane, Nanabe? He's not someone we can fight by ourselves. Kyubi scolded, and Nanabe didn't take kindly to it. She was the third strongest out of all of them. She could hold her own against them if she had to. Well, no der canary. What would you have me do? I have Naruto-kun's subordinates here. Not just that, but they are his friends as well. They don't know the terror of this guy, and I can't just leave them there. I'm in charge of this mission, so excuse me for showing a little bit of concern for my future husband's family, Nanabe said, and this got a light snicker from all of them about her words, but they ignored it for right now. What are we going to do? He's working with Orochimaru of all people. Maybe we should have Naruto-kun call them back, Nibi said, and Kyubi nodded, but Nanabe shook her head though they couldn't see it. No way, we can't do that. They are after Isabu-chan, and knowing that Orochimaru was also after Nibi, then that means that he is with this Akatsuki organization and they really want to try and take him. I'd rather not see our family sucked into a statue, Nanabe said, getting the others to agree. Kyubi sighed and leaned back into the couch. She was trying to think, but Nibi's humming to her stomach wasn't helping at all. She groaned and looked up at the ceiling of the house. Yeah, we can't have that. How strong is he? Kyubi asked. Nibi narrowed her eyes and Nanabe clutched her clothes that were more than a little L as she remembered her encountered. Before or after he sent me flying through the air into the water with a giant S of the Raijin? Nanabe asked, getting Kyubi to nod. I see. So he still has it in his possession. Well, Naruto-kun has all 5 of the swords, so maybe it will turn out well. We can hope anyway, Nibi said, trying to be optimistic, which wasn't really working at the moment. Nanabe and Kyubi stayed silent for a little bit before Nanabe finally spoke. However, something was strange about him, Nanabe said, getting a raised eyebrow from Kyubi and Nibi. How so? Kyubi asked, and Nanabe sighed. She recalled the incident that had happened in front of her. It had been a long time to where she, herself, could fight it out with someone, but she just had to hold back just because Naruto's people were there. Sasuke didn't know about her, but everyone else did. They had seen Fu extract her from her body and none seemed to have reservations about it. Almost none of the UNI clan knew about it, so it was just an undercover thing. Well, his chakra was disturbed. He wasn't doing one of his, I will kill you for being the spawn of that insect, speeches, and you know how much Hisa loves those things. I'm just saying, is there a possibility that he could be controlled? I mean, he hates us just as much as we hate him. If he truly spotted one of us, then, it wouldn't matter who he was working with, he would kill us as easily as he could. He could have fully killed Sanbi-chan if he wanted to, Nanabe said, getting Kyubi and Nibi to nod in agreement with Nanabe's assessment. They all sighed and Kyubi looked up one more time. Where is Sanbi? Kyubi asked, and Nanabe just shrugged. Hiding in the damn water somewhere. You know how he is, Nanabe said, getting Kyubi to nod. She sighed for the umpteenth time and brushed a hand through her red hair. Well, we're just going to have to warn him, also we're going to have to work on seeing what Tsukasa knows, but we'll end it with that. Go talk with him if you can, Kyubi said, and the two faded out while Nanabe stood up to her feet. She grumbled and took off her headband. She looked at it and traced her fingers over it. You owe me one hell of a night when this is over, Naruto-kun. I mean it, Nanabe said before she quickly disappeared. It didn't take long before she dropped to the ground and stood to her feet. Nanabe looked over the barren beach and walked over its semi-destroyed scape. She looked left and right before she came up to the quiet waters. She looked at them blow in the wind and smiled. She didn't know why she was smiling, but she felt the need to. She walked over the water before she quickly dove down. She swam its depths and she snapped her fingers, releasing a ping of chakra. She looked left and right while holding her breath. It didn't take her long to find what she was looking for as she swam up, took another breath of air, and swam back down. She landed on the wet ground while she held out her hand. She quickly launched a massive ping of chakra and watched it bounce along the walls. Soon out of the murky waters, she watched Sanbi appear right in front of her. Her looked at her small form menacingly and Nanabe wasn't happy about it. Don't you use that glare with me, Isabu. Like it or not, I'm still older than you, Nanabe said, and Sanbi backed up. She raised an eyebrow while Nanabe sat on his head. Sanbi quickly surfaced to allowing Nanabe to breathe as he watched her carefully. What are you doing here? Isabu asked, and Nanabe chuckled as she patted him on the head. Hey, how about a hello first, Isabu-chan? Haven't seen each other in 95 years. Be nice, Nanabe said while Isabu did his best to roll his eyes. Yeah sure, whatever you say, but seriously what are you doing with humans? Sanbi asked while Nanabe smiled. She leaned back and lifted her foot over her leg. She looked up at the sky and smiled. Well, humans are interesting. I also like to think that maybe I could be happy with one if I chose. Don't you think so? Nanabe asked, but Sanbi said nothing. Nana sighed and shook her head, so Sanbi decided to address another question. So what are we going to do about him? He's here and he's disturbed. We have to K him. Sanbi said and Nanabe sighed. You think I don't know that. But there is a reason why he just doesn't There is a reason why he's lived longer than even the Rikudo Sennin, a reason why he's as strong as he is, and a reason as to why just the two of us aren't enough to take him down, Nanabe said, and Sanbi stayed silent. I really did miss you. I don't know what those other guys want with me, but I can tell that it's not good. Did you come to seal me away also? Sanbi asked, and to his response Nanabe laughed. He looked up and he noticed her clutching her stomach. I can't lie and say that at first I thought we were going to do that, but the human I love just said no to that. He said he only wants me to protect you. It's because of him and my previous container of why I don't hate humans as much as I used to. You would do if you just gave them a chance, Nanabe said, and Sanbi closed his eyes. He just sighed and snorted. Whatever, if any of you arrive tomorrow I will do what I've always done. Simple as that, Sanbi said, and Nanabe frowned. So she really would have to use it, would she? She didn't want to, but a little brother going against his older sister wasn't what Nanabe was going to stand for. She just stood to her feet and landed on the water. Whatever, Isabu-chan. I know you feel manipulated, but three of us know love. Also you should be happy, in a few months you're going to get a little nephew, Nanabe said, getting Isabu to widen his eyes. She watched his tails go up and crash into the water. What? You got pregnant by a human? Sanbi said, sort of confused, and Nanabe raised an eyebrow. She laughed and shook her head. Oh heck no. That's not happening to me. Nope, it's happening to Kyubi-chan, Nanabe said, and Sanbi felt like he had just been covered in a thick blanket of cold snow. He went silent and he blinked. He raised an eyebrow and coughed. That's a joke, right? He asked. Nope. As wide as a watermelon, I tell ya. He. It's funny to see some of the stuff she eats when she had a craving. Well, I guess that's just the baby. Though seeing that, I wouldn't mind one either. I'm nearly a century old and I haven't gotten any. Neither have you, right? Nanabe asked, and Sanbi's silence was her answer. Well, I'm going to go. Can't keep my team waiting anymore. Just be careful tomorrow, Sanbi. Also, if you put them in danger, family or not, I will stop you, Nanabe said, getting a shiver from Sanbi before she disappeared. Sanbi regressed back into the waters and closed his eyes. He'd find out tomorrow. Somewhere else, again. Sasuke looked up at the moon and sighed to himself. He looked at his sword and he wondered if he could forge it better. As it was then, it wasn't complete. It wasn't on par with Naruto's lightning sword by a margin. Sasuke and Naruto had trained in the Hokage's training ground a few times, and Sasuke's sword was always blown away by Naruto's lightning sword, or Fukun, as he called it. Sasuke held up his sword as he thought back to his fight. It wasn't a very long, and Sasuke really didn't know who Suigetsu was supposed to be, but apparently the guy wanted to K him. Why Sasuke didn't know, but he felt that he could still get stronger. Thanks to Tsunade and Haku, Itachi's eyes were deteriorating as fast as they might have. However, Sasuke and Itachi knew that it wouldn't stay that way. Also, Sasuke knew that now that he had unlocked his own, his eyes would slip into the darkness as well. However, Itachi had told Sasuke that if they did things together, then they could achieve what Naruto had by way of Kakashi's Sharingan and Itachi's Sharingan. It would be just like that. They would get their eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. When Itachi had told Sasuke all about his plot and what Konoha had done, Sasuke had oddly felt nothing to it. He wasn't sure, but it had to have been because of Naruto. It had to have been because Konoha was changing because of Naruto. It was always Naruto. Sasuke closed his eyes and pocketed his sword. He went back to his rather unpleasant memories. How anyone put up with him he didn't know. Sasuke heard a ruffle in the bushes and twitched as he flung a kunai. A loud eep came and the Uchiha noticed a mess of red hair. He narrowed his eyes as Karen came out of the bushes. What do you want? Sasuke asked, unconsciously reaching for his sword. Karen stiffened, but made her way towards him. That was mean, you know. You got my hopes up, Sasuke-kun. When I heard that you were coming to Orochimaru-sama, I so wanted to see. Don't you remember me? Karen asked, and Sasuke tilted his head to the side. The Chunin exams, when you saved me that time. Karen said, annoyed. Sasuke just blinked at her as he scanned his memories. Let's see, Chunin exam, deadbeat teammates, helping some redhead with glasses, missing Chunin finals. Yeah, seems about right. HN, Sasuke replied, and Karen smiled. She quickly erased the distance and smiled as she dropped over Sasuke's body. Don't, HN, me. You miss me, don't you, Sasuke-kun? Karen asked, and Sasuke snorted. You're an enemy. If you know what's good for you, you will quit what you're doing before I see you down, Sasuke said coldly. Karen gasped as she stood away from Sasuke. Well, why don't you come to Orochimaru-sama and then we won't be enemies, Karen said hopefully. Not happening, Sasuke said instantly, and Karen widened her eyes. Why not? You wanted power, right? Power to defeat your brother. He can get you that, Karen said smiling. In truth, she didn't really care what Orochimaru could offer Sasuke so long as he was there. I have power and I've forsaken that ambition. Itachi is not my goal anymore. Also, if I see Orochimaru, then I will end him. Plain and simple. If you work for him, then you are my enemy, Sasuke said while Karen placed her glasses back on. You know of the organization that he's with, right? Akatsuki. They are after the Bayou. They're a group of S-rank criminals, Karen said, and Sasuke snorted. I know who they are and I don't care. Besides, I know I'm not going back because I've already fought Orochimaru. They tried to take 2 of Konoha's Jinchuriki, but that still didn't work out well for them. I can stop Itachi on my own. You should get out while you can, cause either you're going to help me or I'm going to KO you tomorrow, Sasuke said, and Karen growled. No, you're the one who is going to Sasuke. None can stand before Orochimaru-sama, not even you. Karen said, but to her surprise Sasuke didn't take the bait. He just looked at the sky and snorted. I can KO Orochimaru. He couldn't KO Itachi and he can't KO me. It's simple, Karen, you'll stay with him and when you're used to him is over he will waste you, just like he did Kimimaro, Sasuke said, and Karen instantly refuted. No, Kimimaro betrayed Orochimaru. Everyone knows about it. He let someone named Naruto go after you, a traitor. Karen said, and Sasuke sighed. Actually not. I left, he tried to let me go, but Naruto stopped both him and me with shadow clones. Kimimaro was used as the S so that I could get away. He had an incurable disease and it would have stayed incurable if he didn't come to Konoha. Orochimaru used Kimimaro's loyalty since he knew that he wouldn't survive, and Naruto brought me back. You understand nothing, Sasuke said, and Karen punched her palm. So it's this Naruto guy that you won't come. Then I'll just S him, silly, Karen said, and Sasuke snorted. Even if you could get within 10 feet of him you still wouldn't. Besides, doing such a thing is penalty of death in Konoha. Especially to our Rokudaime Hokage, Sasuke said, and he watched Karen's face go pale. Wait, the Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. Son of the Yondaime of Konoha and youngest male to ever be granted the Hokage position. The same that was able to stop the newest Bayou, the Ruby. The same that already has an heir to the clan. Karen asked, and Sasuke narrowed his eyes. You sure know a lot, Sasuke said, and Karen waved him off. In my line of work it pays to know a lot, she said smiling. Sasuke just snorted and looked up. Yeah, mind telling me what that guy's problem is? Sugetsu, what did I do to him? Sasuke asked, and Karen sighed. He keeps saying that you're the reason as to why he doesn't have a sword from one of the 7 swordsmen of the mist. I don't know. I tune him about most of the time, Karen said, getting Sasuke to sigh. He shook his head left and right before he got up. Whatever you're doing to that boy, you're going to regret it. You'll K him and that makes you no worse than Orochimaru, Sasuke said as he walked away, leaving Karen in the field. She sighed and shook her head. Sasuke, she said to herself before shaking her head and walking away. In a nearby tree, Nanabe had seen the action and grinned to herself. A megacure. Nagato folded his arms as he looked at Toby, who was still in a little bad shape, but he managed. What makes you think that she's betrayed us? Conan is one of the most loyal members of this organization. Pain said, and Toby snorted as he lifted himself off his bed. It's usually the ones that you don't want to trust that will be your downfall. I have no evidence, but I know that she is no longer working towards our goals. Even you have to admit that she had changed, Toby said, and Nagato could not deny that at all. All you have are your accusations. In this world, proof is everything. We have our plan in action as it is. All we require is the last 4 Jinchuriki, Nagato said, and he watched as Toby s the wall in front of him. Get it through your thick head. Either you take down the Rokudaime or you'll never achieve peace. As long as he's around, Konoha is not going to just hand over their Jinchuriki. Now that they know we will actively exploit any chance to obtain the 2nd and 7th Jinchuriki, then they will not stop. Also, Kumo's weary of their own Jinchuriki. It was a heavy blow to them to negotiate their Jinchuriki with Konoha, but it brought one of the best alliances to offer. Konoha has the most contacts just off that Hokage alone. Suna, Kiri, and Kumo back him up. In truth, if they do discover this location, then there is nothing keeping them from marching in and kill you or your people. It would be just like Hanzo all over again, Toby said, but he knew he was on some thin ice. Nagato narrowed his eyes dangerously before he turned around. What is it? Toby asked, and Pain narrowed his eyes. Someone is here that shouldn't be here. I know each and every person that comes in and out of this place. This person is new, Pain said, getting Toby to glare behind his mask. Now in the village, Konan panted heavily as she tried to nurse her wounds. She coughed and gripped her B-side. She looked up and she noticed a lone person with a sword advancing on her. She stood to her feet and tried to hold out her hand before she was grabbed and into the wall. Konan coughed while he felt the steel of a cold sword against her body. I won't ask again, insect. Where is this god that you dare to defile Kami with your blasphemous mouth? Nura asked as his eyes slowly began to change from the greenish-yellow tint to a full-blown silver shade. Konan narrowed her eyes, but she could tell one thing. She was in trouble. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.